The throne room of Caraval had not heard a woman's voice in 7 years. 7 years since the last petitioner had dared cross its obsidian threshold. 7 years since the great doors had swung open for anything but war councils and execution decrees. And 7 years since the Alpha King had spoken a single word that did not carry the weight of a death sentence. Yet now, on a morning when frost crawled across the tall windows like silver veins, a woman walked alone down the long basalt aisle. Her boots made no sound on the polished black stone. Her cloak, the deep wine red of House Velleridge, swept behind her in measured silence. The torches mounted along the columns flickered as she passed, as if the flames themselves recognized something dangerous in her approach. The court did not breathe. 47 nobles lined the walls, each frozen between curiosity and dread. Generals who had watched battlefields run red without flinching now stared at this slender figure as though she were walking willingly into an open grave. The royal seneschal, a silver-haired wolf named Orvan Tashkir, gripped the edge of his ceremonial podium until his knuckles turned white. No one stopped her. No one dared. At the end of the aisle, raised on a dais of black marble veined with bone-white quartz, sat the throne of Caraval. And upon that throne sat the man whose name mothers used to silence misbehaving children, whose presence had shattered 3 peace treaties and won 11 wars, whose curse, whispered the servants in the dark corridors, had begun the night his queen had died with their unborn child still inside her. Alpha King Draven Corvani. He sat with one elbow propped against the carved armrest, his chin resting on his knuckles, his obsidian eyes following her advance with the patient stillness of a predator who already knows the kill is certain. His black hair fell loose to his shoulders, threaded with silver at the temples, though he was barely 34. A jagged scar split his left brow and traveled down to his cheekbone, a wound that had never properly healed because, the rumors said, he had refused all healers since the death. The crown he wore was not made of gold. It was forged from the fangs of the 7 alphas he had slain to claim the throne, set in a circlet of blackened iron. The woman stopped at the foot of the dais. She did not bow. A collective intake of breath rippled through the assembled court. To enter the throne room without invitation was a crime punishable by exile. To approach the dais without summons was punishable by death. To stand before the Alpha King without bending the neck in submission was something so unthinkable that no law had been written to address it. The woman lifted her chin. She was perhaps 22, with hair the color of dark honey braided in a single rope down her back, and eyes that were not the soft brown one might expect from a noble Omega, but rather a striking pale gray, like winter sky before snow. Her face was sharper than was safe. "Speak your name," the king said. His voice moved through the air like distant thunder, the kind that promised the storm was already upon you. "Serse Velleridge," she answered, "second daughter of House Velleridge, noble Omega of the Southern Reach." A murmur swept through the court. The Velleridge name was old, but the family had lost most of its power in the wars of the previous decade. "You have intruded upon a closed court, Lady Velleridge. State your purpose before I decide what to do with your throat." The threat was not hyperbole. 2 of his bonded warriors had already begun to shift partially, their fingertips lengthening into claws. Serse did not flinch. She reached up, slowly and deliberately, and unfastened the silver clasp at her throat. The wine-red cloak slid from her shoulders and pooled at her feet like spilled blood. Beneath it, she wore the formal gown of a Velleridge daughter. White silk embroidered with the red wolf of her house. The dress of a woman presenting herself for a binding ceremony. The court understood before the king did. A gasp rose from somewhere among the nobles. The seneschal made a strangled sound and took a step forward, then halted. Serse looked up into the eyes of the most feared wolf in 3 kingdoms. "Marry me," she said. The silence that followed was the void that opens when reality itself stutters and forgets. Briefly, how to continue. The king did not stir. He did not blink. He did not breathe. Then, slowly, he rose from his throne. He was taller than she had imagined. He descended the 3 steps of the dais with the unhurried grace of a wolf who has never needed to rush, because nothing he hunted had ever escaped him. He stopped 1 pace away from her. This close, she could see the gold flecks buried in the obsidian of his eyes. She could feel the heat of him, the controlled fury that lived beneath his skin like a banked forge. "Are you mad?" he asked quietly. "No, Your Majesty. I am desperate. There is a difference, though the symptoms can resemble each other." "Do you know what I am?" "I know what they say you are. A monster. A king who buried his queen and his unborn heir in the same grave 7 winters ago. A wolf whose grief broke into something the realm has never seen before. A man whose touch is said to wither what it loves. They say no Omega can stand within 10 paces of you without losing her wolf. They say your bond mark itself is poisoned, that whoever you claim will sicken and die within a year." The king's jaw tightened. The gold in his eyes flared. "And knowing this," he said, "you have come to ask for my hand." "No, Your Majesty." Saoirse straightened her spine. "I have come to give you mine." A wind that had no source moved through the throne room. The torches guttered. The frost on the windows cracked in long, branching lines. Then he reached for her wrist. The court cried out. 2 of his warriors lunged forward, but the king raised his other hand and they froze. His fingers closed around her wrist. Saoirse did not pull away. His grip was not gentle. She could feel the strength in him, the barely leashed force that could have shattered the bone of her arm with a thought. But he did not crush her. He simply held her, his thumb pressed against the pulse point, feeling the rhythm of her heart. "Your heart," he said softly, "knows you should be terrified. My heart and I have learned not to consult each other on important matters." The shadow of amusement, gone in an instant. "Why?" the king asked. The question carried the weight of every unspoken accusation in the room. Saoirse opened her mouth to answer, and that was the instant the great doors at the far end of the throne room slammed open with the force of a battering ram. A messenger staggered through, his clothes torn, his face streaked with blood and snow. He fell to 1 knee before he had crossed half the aisle. "Your Majesty," he choked out, "the northern watchtowers, they have fallen, all 7 of them." Murmurs of horror rippled through the court. "Who?" the king demanded. "Who would dare?" The messenger's eyes were wide with a terror that had nothing to do with the kingdom's enemies and everything to do with what he had seen with his own eyes. "It was not an army, my king," he whispered. "It was 1 wolf." The torches in the throne room died all at once, plunging the court into darkness. And before the servants could relight them, Saoirse felt the king's grip on her wrist tighten, not in threat, but in something far more dangerous: recognition. The torches roared back to life, but the cold that had swept through the throne room did not retreat with the shadows. Draven Corvana had not released her wrist. He stood absolutely still, his eyes fixed somewhere far beyond the trembling messenger. Then his gaze snapped back, and Saoirse felt the full force of his attention land on her like a physical weight. "Council chamber," he said. "Now." He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. Every wolf in the throne room moved at once. The court emptied like water from a broken vessel. But the king did not move. Neither did Saoirse. He looked down at her wrist still caught in his grip, as if he had only just remembered he was holding her. "You are not afraid of me," he said. "I am terrified of you. Your heartbeat says otherwise. My heartbeat is a poor liar. It races for many reasons that have nothing to do with fear. Almost a smile. Almost." He released her. "Walk with me, Lady Velleridge." It was not a request. She bent to retrieve her fallen cloak. He waited. She fastened the silver clasp at her throat with hands that shook only slightly, and then she followed him through the side passage. The corridors of Caraval had been built by an older, harder people than those who lived in them now. The stone walls were 10 feet thick and carved with battle reliefs, whose subjects had been dead for 6 centuries. There were no flowers, no tapestries, no signs of softness anywhere. This was a fortress wearing the costume of a palace. "You said you were desperate," he said without turning. "Explain." She had rehearsed the answer for 31 days. Now, walking 3 paces behind the most dangerous wolf in 3 kingdoms, she found her rehearsed words tasted like ash. "My house is dying, Your Majesty." "Many houses are dying. Mine has 9 days remaining." That made him stop. He turned to face her in the middle of the corridor, beneath a hanging lamp whose iron chains creaked faintly in a draught that had no source. 9 days, he repeated. "My elder sister was promised to House Merofen 6 years ago. The contract specified that if she did not produce an heir by her 28th year, our southern holdings would be forfeit. My sister died of marsh fever 2 summers ago. The contract did not specify which Veleridge daughter must produce the heir. It specified only that one of us must be wed to a man of equal or greater rank, and bearing a child, before the deadline expired. And the deadline? The first day of the next moon. 9 days from this morning. "You came here to use me," he said quietly. "I came here to survive, Your Majesty. There are easier wolves to marry than the cursed king of Caraval. There are no wolves of equal or greater rank than you in 3 kingdoms. The contract is specific. I have weighed the cost of my reputation against the lives of 700 souls who depend on my house for protection through the winter. The arithmetic is not difficult." He studied her without speaking. "There is something you have not said. You stood in my throne room and listed the curses laid against my name. You knew what marrying me means. And yet you came." He took a single step closer. "Survival does not explain that. So tell me, Lady Veleridge." He bent his head until his face was level with hers. "Why me?" The question was so soft it was almost gentle. It was the most dangerous thing he had said to her yet. The rehearsed lie was on her tongue, and the truth was beneath it. And she did not know which one would emerge until she heard it leave her lips. "Because I have seen you before," she said. His eyes changed. The gold flecks within the obsidian flared, dimmed, flared again. "Where?" he whispered. She could not answer, because at that exact instant, far above them in the high tower of the eastern wing, a bell began to toll. It was a bell that had not been heard in Caraval in 7 years. It hung in the topmost chamber of the Black Sun Tower, and it was rung only when the gravest threats approached the kingdom. It had been silent since the night the queen had died. The bell tolled a second time, and a third, and a fourth, and a fifth. 5 tolls. Sersa did not know what 5 tolls meant, but the king's face went the color of old bone. "Impossible," he breathed. His hand was around her upper arm, and he was pulling her down the corridor at a pace just shy of a run. They burst through a door into a circular chamber lit by a single great brazier whose flames burned blue. Around a long table of black wood stood 7 men and 2 women, all of them wolves of high rank. The seneschal looked up. His face was gray. "My king." The watchtowers were only the beginning. Scouts report a column moving through the hollow pass. They will reach the outer wall before dawn. "How many?" "There are no numbers, my king. There is only one. It is moving them, my king. The bodies of our garrison. It is walking them like puppets." The blue flames in the brazier guttered. The king turned to her. "Lady Veleridge, I will marry you. Tonight. Beneath the black sun, before the next bell tolls. There will be no ceremony, no witnesses, but the seneschal and the bound priest. You will sign your name into the Corvenay ledger, and you will take the bond mark of my house, and you will become my queen, before this thing reaches our walls. Your Majesty. And then, he said, you will tell me where you have seen me before. Because if I am right about what is coming, your answer is the only thing in this kingdom that may save us both. He turned to the seneschal. Prepare the rite, wake the priest, and bring me the obsidian ring from my mother's vault. My king, the seneschal whispered, that ring has not been worn since. I know when it was last worn. The seneschal bowed and fled. The king turned back to her one last time before sweeping from the chamber. Welcome to your new home, my queen. The blue flames in the brazier turned, briefly, the color of blood. They came for her at the 11th hour of the night. Serse stood in a chamber that had not been opened in 7 winters, watching 3 silent maids prepare her for a wedding that was not a wedding. The room had been her predecessor's. A silver hairbrush still rested on the vanity, its bristles holding 3 pale strands of someone else's hair. A book of poetry sat open on the bedside table, the page marked by a pressed sprig of mountain heather, brown and brittle now. She had married a ghost before she had even married the king. The maids did not speak to her. They worked with the efficiency of women who had been instructed to do this thing quickly and to ask no questions. They unbraided her hair and rebraided it in the elaborate crown knot of a Corvan queen. They removed her wine-red cloak and replaced it with one of black wolf fur, lined in silver silk that shimmered like moonlight on water. The youngest maid, a girl no older than 16 with a thin scar across the bridge of her nose, paused when she came to the silver hairpin Serse's mother had given her 3 days ago. My lady, she whispered, the first words any of them had spoken. Forgive me, but you should not wear this tonight. The bond mark requires that the bride enter the chamber wearing nothing of her former house. Her mother had pressed it into her palm at the carriage door. Come back, she had said. Whatever happens, come back. Take it, Saoirse said. Keep it safe for me. The girl's eyes widened. To accept such a thing from a woman about to take the Corvanet mark was an act that could see a maid hanged. I will come back for it. The girl nodded quickly and slipped the pin into the hidden pocket of her apron. A bell tolled somewhere in the depths of the keep. Once, then a second time. She was ready. The Black Sun Chapel was not in the keep. It was beneath it. The seneschal led her down a spiral staircase carved into the living rock of the mountain. The walls grew warmer as they descended, then hotter. The torches here did not flicker. They burned steady and blue. My lady, the seneschal said quietly as they descended, you are not required to do this. The contract with Merofen requires it, Lord Tashkir. There are other paths than the contract. None that save my brother. He was silent for the space of 3 steps. Then, you should know that the bond mark of Corvan is not the bond mark of other houses. It is older. It binds the wolf as well as the woman. If the marriage is broken, by death or by separation, the mark does not fade. It festers. It has driven women to take their own lives within the year. I know. He stopped on the stairs and turned to look at her. Then you know that he will not love you, he said. He cannot. There is nothing left in him to love with. The grief took it, and the curse keeps it. And what remains of King Draven Corvan is not a husband. It is a sword that occasionally remembers it once had a hand. I do not require love, Lord Tashkir. I require a name and a child. I hope, my lady, that you mean that. He turned and continued down the stairs. The chapel was a circular chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow above. At the center stood a black stone slab carved with a single deep groove that ran from one end to the other, like a riverbed cut for blood. Above it hung an iron disc the size of a wagon wheel. The disc was the black sun. The king was already there. Dressed in the formal black of his house, the fang crown gone, his hair pulled back from his face for the first time. Beside him stood a man robed entirely in white, his hood pulled up so that his face remained in shadow. The bound priest. Chosen as a child, taken from his family, bound to a single house for life. He could speak only the words of the rite. It was said his soul was not his own. The seneschal led her to the opposite side of the slab and stepped back. The king extended his right hand, palm up, across the slab. Saoirse placed her left hand in his. The bound priest spoke. His voice was the voice of something that had once been a man and was now a vessel. The words were older than the kingdom, older perhaps than human throats had been shaped to speak. The black sun above them began very slowly to rotate. Saoirse Velarridge, the king said, I take you as my mate, my queen, and the bearer of my name. I bind my wolf to yours, and my fate to yours, and what is mine shall be yours from this hour until the breath leaves my body or the gods unmake the world. He paused. Now you. The words came to her as though they had been waiting in her mouth her whole life. Draven Corvan, I take you as my mate, my king, and the father of my house. I bind my wolf to yours, and my fate to yours, and what is mine shall be yours from this hour until the breath leaves my body, or the gods unmake the world. The black sun above them stopped rotating. The bound priest lifted from his sleeves a small knife of bone and a circlet of obsidian set, with a single drop of dark red stone. Saoirse realized, with a chill, was not a stone at all. It was old blood. This will hurt. I know. It will hurt for the rest of your life. I know. Last chance, Lady Velarridge. Mark me, Your Majesty. He drew the knife across his own palm first. Black blood welled up. He pressed his bleeding palm to the slab. The groove drank the blood like a parched mouth. Then he took her left hand and turned it palm up. The cut he made was clean and shallow, almost careful. Her blood ran red and bright onto the slab, and where it met his black blood, both turned briefly the color of old gold. He set the obsidian circlet against the inside of her wrist. The mark seared into her skin like a brand pulled from a forge. She did not cry out. She bit through the inside of her cheek and tasted blood, and she held his eyes, and she did not look away. When he lifted the circlet, the mark remained. A black wolf's head, no larger than a coin, surrounded by 7 small marks she could not yet read. It was done. She was Queen of Kerval. The seneschal escorted them back up the stairs in silence. They reached the upper hall just as a guard came running. My king, my queen. He bowed clumsily. There is a man at the outer gate. He is asking for the queen by name. Saoirse went very still. He says he has come to speak with Saoirse Velarridge of the Southern Reach. He says he has waited 7 years for this night. And he says... The guard's voice cracked. He says he is the one who killed your queen. The king stood frozen. For a heartbeat, Saoirse was not certain he had heard. Then she felt, through the new mark on her wrist, a wave of something so cold and so vast that her knees nearly buckled. It was not fury. It was older than fury. It was the thing that fury becomes after 7 years of waiting in the dark. The king turned to her. His eyes had gone entirely gold. Stay here, he said. No. Saoirse. He came for me. I will go to the gate. You will die at the gate. Then we will go together. For one taut, suspended pause, the Alpha King of Kerval looked at the woman he had married 20 minutes ago, and Saoirse felt something pass between them through the new bond that was a recognition that ran deeper than warmth or cold. He extended his hand. She took it. And together, the cursed king and the desperate Omega walked toward the gate where the man who had murdered his first queen was waiting in the snow. The outer gate of Kerval had been built to withstand a siege of 10,000 wolves. It had not been built to withstand one man standing alone. He was waiting in the courtyard beyond the inner portcullis. 24 warriors had formed a ring around him, blades drawn, several already shifted halfway into wolf form. The torches mounted along the gatehouse walls flickered in a wind that did not exist anywhere else in the courtyard. He stood with his back to the gate, his face turned up toward the snow that fell in slow, lazy spirals from the black sky. He wore a traveler's cloak so threadbare it was almost gray, and his hands were bare and ungloved. His hair was pale, almost white. He seemed, from the ramparts, almost ordinary. She knew, with a certainty that came up through the new bond mark on her wrist, like a flare from a deep well, that he was not. "Stay behind me," the king said. She did not answer. They descended the gatehouse stairs. The man did not turn until they had crossed half the courtyard. When he did, the warriors of the inner ring took an involuntary step backward. His face was unmarked. His eyes were the color of pale river water. But there was something wrong with him. The air around him bent slightly, the way air bends above a hot stone in summer. Snow that fell within 3 paces of him did not melt. It simply ceased to exist before it touched the ground. The bond mark on Saoirse's wrist pulsed once, hard, and then went cold. "Draven Corvana," the man said. "You will speak the name you were born with," the king said, "or you will not speak again." The man tilted his head. "That name has not been heard in this kingdom for a very long time. I am called Thessaly Vorn." The name meant nothing to Saoirse, but the king beside her went absolutely still. "Vorn," Draven repeated. "You know the name after all. It is on the death rolls of my house, 6 generations ago. 7, actually. The Vorn line was ended by your ancestor in the Second War of Consolidation. My house was scattered, my kin were hunted, and the last of us, an old woman and her grandson, were burned in a barn outside the village of Threshen. The grandson did not die. You are the grandson. I am the grandson. That is not possible. And yet." The wind in the courtyard stopped entirely. The snow hung in the air, suspended. "Why are you here?" the king said. "Why have you come now?" "Because I have been waiting. Because the conditions at last are right." Thessaly's pale eyes shifted from the king to Saoirse, and she felt the look settle on her, like a hand laid against the back of her neck. "Because you have done me the great favor of marrying her tonight, before I had to go to the trouble of arranging it myself." The king moved. One heartbeat he was beside her, and the next he had crossed the distance between himself and Thessaly Vorn, and his hand was around the man's throat. The warriors lunged forward, but Draven raised his other hand and they froze. His grip on Thessaly's throat should have crushed the man's windpipe. It did not. The king's hand was clenched so tightly that his own knuckles had gone white, and Thessaly Vorn stood beneath that grip as untroubled as a man who had felt a child's fingers brush against his neck. "You see?" Thessaly said. "You cannot." "What are you?" "I am what your ancestor made of me, Draven Corvan. When he burned my grandmother in that barn, he did not know she had been a hedge witch of the old kind. He did not know what she would do, in her last breath, to spare her grandson's life. I did not know either. It took me a long time to understand, but I have had nothing but time." He looked down at the king's hand around his throat. "You may release me now. You are hurting yourself." The king held on for another heartbeat. Then his fingers uncurled. There were no marks on Thessaly Vorn's neck. "Why did you kill my queen?" Draven said. "Because she carried your heir." "Why?" "Because the line of Corvana must end, my king. That is the work I have been given. Your father was a difficult man to reach. Your grandfather was harder. But you, Draven, you made yourself reachable when you fell in love. You made yourself a wound, and a wound is a door." The king's hands had begun to shake. Saoirse stepped forward. "You said you would have arranged this marriage yourself, if the king had not." "Why?" Thessaly studied her without answering at first. "Because you, my lady, are not what you believe yourself to be." Because the blood in your veins is not the blood your mother told you it was, and because the curse that has eaten this kingdom from the inside for 7 winters cannot be ended without you. I am sorry for what is about to happen to you. There is no malice in it. There is only the work. Saoirse opened her mouth to ask what he meant. Thessaly Vorna raised one bare hand. He did not touch her. The air between them shimmered, and the bond mark on her wrist erupted in pain so sudden and so total that she dropped to her knees in the snow. She heard the king roar. She heard a sound like an iron bell being struck very far away. And then, beneath all of it, she heard a voice that was not Thessaly Vorn's voice. It was her own voice, speaking from somewhere inside her chest, in a language she had never been taught. The voice said one word. Remember. The world went white. When Saoirse opened her eyes, she was lying on her back in the snow. The king was kneeling over her. Thessaly Vorn was gone, not fled, not pursued, simply gone. The only sign he had been there was a single set of footprints in the snow, leading from the outer gate to the spot where he had stood, and stopping. There were no footprints leading away. Saoirse, look at me. Her vision was strange. There was a doubling at the edges, and behind his shoulder, in the dark sky, she could see something that should not have been there. A second pale shape, hanging beside the true moon, bone white, smaller, and too still to be any moon she had ever read of. She did not yet know what it was, but she understood, looking at it, that it was something that had always been there, and had always been hidden, and was now no longer hidden from her. None of the warriors looked up. Only she could see it. What is wrong with her eyes? One of the warriors demanded. The king leaned closer. Saoirse, your eyes. They are not gray anymore. She did not understand what he meant. She would not understand for many hours. But the bond mark on her wrist had stopped burning, and in its place, beneath the cloth, something new had begun to grow. A second mark, one that had not been part of the rite. She woke before dawn in a bed that was not hers. The chamber was warm. A fire crackled in a stone hearth. The bed she lay in was vast, four-postered, hung with curtains of dark green velvet. She wore a soft white shift she did not remember being dressed in. Her wrist was wrapped in fresh cloth. She sat up slowly and unwound it with shaking fingers. The Corvane bond mark was there. The 7 small marks around it were beginning to form themselves into recognizable shapes, but beneath the bond mark, on the soft skin of her inner forearm, was the new thing. A circle, perfectly round, no larger than her thumbprint. Inside the circle, a crescent. Inside the crescent, a single small dot. The whole symbol was the color of dried blood, but it had not been cut into her skin. It looked instead as though it had risen up from beneath, the way a bruise rises after an injury that has not yet declared itself. She traced it. It was warm. A soft sound came from the corner of the chamber. A woman she did not recognize was rising from a chair beside the fire. She was perhaps 50, broad-shouldered, with iron-gray hair pulled back into a severe knot. She wore the dark blue robes of a healer. My queen, forgive me. I did not wish to wake you. How long have I slept? 4 hours. It is not yet dawn. The king has not slept. He is asked to be summoned the instant you wake. Who are you? My name is Mireska Vol. I have served as healer to the Corvana house for 31 years. I dressed the queen on the morning of her wedding. I closed her eyes on the night of her death. And I have been instructed by the king to attend to you for the remainder of yours. She crossed the room and took Saoirse's wrist gently. May I look? Mireska studied the new mark without speaking. My queen, I am going to ask you a question and I want you to answer it truthfully. Have you ever, in your life, dreamed of a black sun? Saoirse's breath caught. How did you? You have then? Yes, since I was 7 years old. The same dream. Always. I am standing in a circular room, and the sun above me is black, and there is a man. She stopped. A man, Mireska said gently. A man with a scar across his face. He is sitting on a throne, and he looks at me, and he says. She could not finish. Mireska released her wrist and walked to the fireplace. When she turned back, her eyes had gone the color of old tin. What I am about to tell you, I will deny if you repeat it to anyone but the king. There is a thing that happens in the line of Corvana, very rarely, perhaps once in 3 or 4 generations. A king is born who carries something the histories will not name. The court calls it the seer blood. King Draven carries it. His mother carried it before him. It is what made him strong. It is also, in part, what destroyed him. What does it have to do with me? It is not supposed to be possible for the seer blood to manifest in anyone outside the Corvani line. It is not supposed to be possible for 2 seers to dream the same dream across years of separation. It is not supposed to be possible for a noble Omega from the southern reach to wear the second mark of the moon circle on her forearm 3 hours after taking the bond mark of a king she has never met before tonight. She paused. And yet, what if I had met him before? Mireska went still. Tell me. I dreamed of him before I knew his name. I dreamed of his face before I had ever seen any portrait of him. I dreamed of this castle before I had ever traveled north of my father's lands. When I was 14, I drew him from a dream, and my mother burned the drawing, and I did not understand why she had wept while she did it. When the contract with Marofen came due, I did not need to think about who I would marry. I knew. I had known since I was 7 years old. I came here because I thought perhaps the dreams had been a kind of preparation. My queen. Tell me what is happening to me. Mireska Vol considered her quietly. I do not know. But the thing in the courtyard tonight knew, and he said you were not what you believed yourself to be. That is something I would advise you not to dismiss. She moved toward the door. I will summon the king. Mireska. My mother. Did she know? Mireska's silence was the longest she had given yet. My queen, I would not presume to answer that question, but I would ask you, when next you write to her, whether she has ever told you the full truth of who your father was. She bowed and left. The king came alone. He pushed open the door without knocking and closed it behind him with a force that suggested he had only barely restrained himself from breaking it. He had not changed out of the formal black he had worn at the rite. His hair had come loose from its tie. He stopped at the foot of the bed. He did not say anything immediately. He looked at her, and Saoirse felt the look move down her like a slow inventory. His eyes lingered on the mark. Mireska told me what you have, and what you dreamed. Did you dream of me too? The king was silent for a heavy stretch. I dreamed of a woman, he said finally. Since I was 9 years old. She was older in the dreams than you are now. She had your face. She had your hair. When my queen died, the dreams stopped. I assumed they had been about her. I assumed I had failed to recognize my mate when she stood before me, and the gods had punished me by taking her early. I have lived for 7 years believing that. He stopped. I was wrong. The woman in the dreams was never her. The room held its breath. He crossed to the side of the bed. Show me your arm. She extended it. He took her wrist with the same care Mireska had used, but his touch was different. There was no clinical distance in it. His fingers traced the edge of the new mark. His hand was trembling. My mother, he said quietly, wore this mark, on her left forearm, in the same place. She carried it from the day she was born to the day she died. She never spoke of what it meant, even to me. But she touched it, sometimes, when she was thinking. The way a woman touches a charm. I have not seen this mark on another living person in 26 years. Then how? I do not know. He set her wrist down gently. He lowered himself onto the edge of the bed, leaving a clear handspan of distance. Saoirse. It was the first time he had used her given name. I married you tonight believing I was performing a transaction. You wanted a name. I wanted a queen. The realm could rally around in the war I knew was coming. I did not believe I was capable of more than that. I have not believed I was capable of more than that for 7 winters. He did not look at her. I am no longer certain what I believe. The candle on the bedside table flickered. Saoirse reached out and laid her hand against his, where it rested on the blanket between them. He held perfectly still. But after a held breath, his fingers turned beneath hers, and his palm met her palm, and his thumb settled against the inside of her wrist over the new mark, and she felt something inside her chest ease in a way that nothing had eased in many months. Stay, she said quietly, until dawn. You do not have to speak. You do not have to do anything. Only stay. The king of Kerval, who had not slept in his own bed in 7 years, slowly nodded. He removed his boots. He removed the heavy outer coat of his ceremonial black. He lay down on top of the blankets beside her, fully clothed, his head on the pillow she had not used. He did not touch her. But before her eyes closed, she felt his hand find hers again beneath the covers, and his fingers thread between hers, and his thumb settle once more over the new mark on her wrist, as though to keep watch over it while she slept. She slept. The black sun did not come into her dreams that night. For the first time in 15 years, nothing did. She woke alone. Daylight, gray and thin, was coming through the high windows. The fire had burned down to embers. The king was gone, but the indentation of his head on the pillow beside hers remained, and the blanket on his side had been smoothed back into place by a hand that had taken care to do so. There was a folded note on the bedside table, weighted down with the obsidian circlet. Saoirse, I will return at dusk. Mireska has been instructed to prepare you for what we must discuss. Do not leave the keep. There is a rider going south to your mother's house this morning. If you wish to send a message, give it to him before the 6th bell. The contract with House Marrowfen has been cancelled by my hand and seal at first light. Whatever your 9 days were, they are no longer yours to count. You have me now, and what I have, I keep. D. She read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and pressed it flat against her sternum. A rider going south. Whether she has ever told you the full truth of who your father was. She knew, suddenly, what message she would send. Mireska arrived an hour later. She did not comment on the bed where 2 pillows had been used. She did not comment on the king's coat, folded neatly on the chair. She simply set down a tray, opened the curtains, and sat in the chair beside the fire. My queen, I have been told to teach you what I know. There is a story that the bound priests are not allowed to tell. It is not in any history book in this kingdom. It exists only in the memory of the women of House Corvan, and it has been passed from queen to queen for 19 generations. The last queen of Corvana, before she died, asked me to keep the story for her. Tell me. In the time before this kingdom had a name, there were 3 sisters. The histories will tell you they were goddesses, but they were not. They were women, only women, but very old ones, and they had between them a power the world had not yet learned to name. The eldest sister was called the sun. The middle sister was called the moon. The youngest sister was called the hidden star because she walked between the other 2 and was not always seen. The 3 sisters made a vow. The sun gave herself to the line of kings, that there would always be a wolf strong enough to lead. The moon gave herself to the line of healers, that there would always be a hand gentle enough to mend. The hidden star gave herself to no line at all. She walked in shadow. She bound herself to no house. Her gift was that she could see what the other 2 could not, and act where the other 2 were forbidden to act. The Corvana line carries the blood of the sun. That is what the seer blood is. My line, the line of Vol, carries the blood of the moon. We do not marry kings. We hold our line apart, and we serve. And the hidden star. The hidden star bound herself to no house, but she had children too, and her children had children, and the blood thinned across the centuries until almost no one carried it any longer. But every once in a great while, in a generation no one expects, a child is born who has more of the star in her than the world knows, who dreams of things she should not dream of, who is born perhaps to a mother who married a man of an unremarkable house, and who does not know what the man's blood truly was. Saoirse felt the room beginning to recede from her. My father. My queen, I do not know who your father was. But the new mark on your forearm is not a mark of the sun, and it is not a mark of the moon. It is the mark of the star. It has not been seen on a living person in this kingdom in more than 200 years. It rises only when the star blood in a person has been awakened by something powerful enough to call it forth. The bond mark of Corvan, taken willingly. Yes, it is what woke you. Why did Thessaly Vorn come for me? Because the Vorn line, my queen, was not what your histories say it was either. They were not merchants or minor nobles. They were the keepers of an older oath. They were the ones whose work was to make sure that when the star blood rose, it did not survive to use itself. They were the ones who hunted the children who dreamed. And he is the last of them. He is the last of them. And he has been waiting for you for a very long time. Saoirse looked down at her wrist. She remembered being 7 years old and waking from the first dream, sitting up in her bed and crying without knowing why, and her mother coming into her room and holding her, and her mother's hands shaking against her back. She had thought it was love. It might have been love. It might also have been something else. What does the star do? When she is awake, what is her gift? My queen, no one in this kingdom has known the answer to that question for many lifetimes. The histories tell us only what she did, not how she did it. But I have a guess. The two older sisters had each only one gift. The sun could lead. The moon could heal. The hidden star, who walked between them, could see what the other two could not see, and could act where the other two were forbidden to act. Mireska's voice grew very quiet. I think, my queen, that the star's gift was the gift of breaking, of unmaking, of undoing what could not otherwise be undone. Curses. Yes, among other things. I have served in this keep for 31 years, and I have watched this curse eat my king from the inside, and I have not been able to lift 1 inch of it. None of my line has been able to. Healing is not breaking. The two are not the same gift. Mireska's eyes had gone wet. But you are. You are the gift the kingdom has been waiting for, and did not know it was waiting for. And the Vorn line knew. They have been waiting for you since before you were born. A bell tolled. The 6th bell. Saoirse rose unsteadily. I need to write a letter. She went to the small writing desk by the window. She took up the quill, dipped it, and paused. She wrote 3 words. Who was he? She folded the parchment. She sealed it with wax. She wrote her mother's name on the outside and gave it to Mireska. When the healer had gone, Saoirse stood at the window. The single set of footprints leading from the outer gate to the spot where Thessaly Vorn had stood was still there. The snow within 3 paces of where he had stood had never fallen at all. She lifted her gaze to the pale sky. The bone-colored disk she had seen the night before, hanging beside the true moon, was still there even now in daylight, faint as a watermark on old parchment, visible only to her. It was not a moon. It had a shape, and the shape was familiar, and it was waiting to be recognized. She pressed her hand flat against the window. The glass was cold beneath her palm. But beneath her palm, where her own hand met the glass, a small circle of frost had begun to form on the inside of the pane, and within that circle of frost, in tiny, perfect lines, was a sigil, a circle, a crescent, a single small dot. She had not drawn it. The star had drawn itself. The reply came on the 9th day. The kingdom had not been quiet during those 9 days. 2 more watchtowers had fallen. A village along the eastern road had been found empty, every door standing open, every hearth still warm, and not a single body or footprint in the snow to suggest where its 300 souls had gone. The king had come to her bed each night and lain beside her and held her hand beneath the blankets and said almost nothing. He had not touched her further than that. She had not asked him to. Something between them had grown careful. He came at full dark. He rose before the first bell. Sometimes she felt his thumb tracing the new mark on her forearm in the darkness, slowly, as though he were memorizing it. She had begun to understand what the seneschal had told her on the stairs. There was nothing left in him to love with. The grief had taken it. The curse kept it. And yet, each morning, when she woke, she could feel where his hand had rested. On the 9th morning, the rider returned. Mireska brought the letter up an hour later. The healer said nothing when she handed it across. The seal was not her mother's. It was her younger brother's. Saersa broke it with hands that did not feel like her own. The letter was short. Sion Velerage had been 15 for 2 months. He apologized first, 3 times. He apologized for what he was about to tell her, which their mother had asked him to write, because she could not bring herself to write the words. Their mother was ill. She had been ill since the morning Saersa had left for Kerval. She had stopped eating 4 days ago. She had stopped speaking 2 days ago. The household healer had said it was not a fever and not a wound, and not anything that could be named, but only a grief that had finally outlasted her body's willingness to fight it. She had asked Kian to write 3 things. The first, forgive me. The second, he was not who you think he was, and I will not put his name on paper because the name itself is the danger. Ask the man you have married. He will know. The third, come home. Saersa read it 3 times. She did not weep. There was something beyond weeping that she had stepped into the instant she finished the second reading. She folded the letter. She walked across the chamber to the chair where the king's coat had hung untouched for 9 days, and she lifted it, and she pressed her face into the dark wool and breathed in the scent of him, smoke and snow and something colder underneath, and she did not weep. Then she went to find him. He was not in the council chamber. He was not in the throne room. She found him, eventually, in a place she had not been brought to before. Mireska had given her the directions with a strange reluctance. The way led down through 3 flights of narrow stairs, and finally through a small wooden door set so unobtrusively into the stone that Saersa passed it twice before she found the latch. It opened onto a garden. The garden was inside the mountain. It was the size of a small chapel, walled on every side by living rock. There were no flowers. There were no trees. There were stones. They had been arranged in 7 concentric rings, with a small open space at the center. Each stone was the height of a child and had been carved with a name. The carvings on the outermost rings were old and weathered. The carvings closer to the center were sharper. The nearest 2 stones to the center had been cut within Saersa's lifetime. She read the name on the nearest as she approached. Iseult Corvan, beloved wife, mother of one who did not draw breath. The other was smaller, the unnamed son, who was waited for, who was loved before he came. The king knelt in the open space at the center. He had not heard her enter, or he had heard her, and chosen not to acknowledge it. He was not crying. He was not speaking. He knelt with one knee in the cold earth and his hand pressed flat against the smaller stone. Saersa stopped at the edge of the outermost ring. She stood there without moving for some time. After perhaps a quarter of an hour, the king spoke without turning. I come here on the 9th of every month. Today is the 9th, she said. Yes, No one knows. Mireska knows. The bound priest knew, before this one. He still had not turned. I assume you have come because the rider returned. Yes. And the letter was not what you hoped. My mother is dying. My brother says she has stopped eating. She told him to tell me 3 things, and the second of them was that you would know my father's name, because the name itself is too dangerous to put on parchment. The king was silent, his hand still on the smaller stone. Then he rose. He turned to face her across the 7 rings of stone. His face was pale, and there was earth on the knee of his trousers, and his eyes in the gray shaft of light were not obsidian, but the old, exhausted gold of a wolf at the end of a long winter. I know your father's name, he said. Tell me. Saoirse, come and sit with me before I tell you. What I am about to say cannot be heard standing. It must be heard close, where another hand can hold yours when the words land. She crossed the 7 rings of stone. He took her hand, and they sat together on the cold earth between his queen's grave and his son's, and he did not let go of her fingers as he spoke. Your father, he said, was named Aldwyn Vorn. Saoirse heard the name from a great distance. Vorn, the same line as the man in the courtyard, yes. How can that be? The Vorn line did not end 6 generations ago. It went into hiding. They scattered. They took new names. They married into other houses quietly, and they kept their work going across the centuries. And they hunted the children who dreamed. Your father was one of them. My grandfather had a list of every hidden Vorn. Aldwyn's name was on that list. We knew where he was. We had been watching him for 20 years. Why did you not kill him? Because we did not know he had a daughter. Saoirse did not breathe. He died when I was 4, she whispered. A hunting accident. My mother always said, your mother lied to you. Your father came to my father's house in the year before I was born. He came alone, on foot, at night, and he asked for sanctuary. He said he had broken with his line. He said he had refused the work. He said he had fallen in love, against every oath he had ever taken, with a woman of a southern noble house, and he had married her, and she carried his child, and the rest of the Vorney line had discovered him and was coming to kill them both. My father gave him sanctuary. He hid him. He hid your mother. When the child came, my father stood as godfather. The Vorn line caught up to your father 7 months after that, and they killed him in the gardens of my father's keep, and my father killed them in turn, and your mother took the child and went south, and was told never to speak of any of it, ever, to anyone, on pain of the child's life. The child was me. He had been dead since you were 1. She kept the lie running because it was easier to maintain than the truth, and because the truth would have killed you both. My father broke with the Vorn line. He died for breaking with it. He gave his life to save me, before I was old enough to understand what I was being saved from. Yes. And I came here. After all of that, I came here. Of my own choosing, and I asked you to marry me. Yes. Thessaly Vorn. He is my kin. He is your father's brother. Your uncle. The last of the unbroken line. He came to kill me. He came to do worse than kill you. He came to use you. The Vorn line cannot end the Corvani line on its own. They have tried for centuries. They cannot. The Corvani line has always been protected by something they could not reach. That something is the star. To end my line, they need a star to do it. He cannot break me. Saoirse. He has been preparing to break you since before you were born. She closed her eyes. She felt his thumb move once across her knuckles. Draven. The night we married. You told me the bond would save us both. If I told you where I had seen you before. You believed it then. You believed it before you knew what I was? Why? He was silent for the better part of a minute. Because my mother told me, before she died, that one day a woman would come to this keep alone, in a red cloak, and that I would know her. that she would carry something I had been waiting for without knowing I was waiting, that I should not turn her away, even if every voice in the council told me I should. When you walked into the throne room in the Velleridge Red, I almost ordered you killed where you stood. Not because you frightened me, because you did not. She opened her eyes. His face was very close to hers. She lifted her free hand and laid it against his cheek, over the scar. He closed his eyes. He turned his face into her palm. He held the silence between them. The thing that had been growing carefully between them for 9 nights cracked open in the garden of stone. He lifted his head. He looked at her, and Saoirse understood that she had married a man who had not allowed himself to look at her until now. He bent his head, and his mouth came down to hers. And the kiss was the kiss of a man who had not kissed anyone in 7 winters, and a woman who had never been kissed before by anyone who had meant it. When he drew back, his eyes were wet, and so were hers. Saoirse, I am going to lift this curse. How? I do not know yet, but you are the gift that was sent to me, and I am going to learn how to use it without losing you. And I am going to take my kingdom back from the thing that has been eating it. And then I am going to give you a child of your own, and a name that no one will ever take from you, and a life that will not be measured in 9-day deadlines or the work of dead men. Draven. The bell. The bell had begun to toll. 5 tolls. The same 5 tolls as on their wedding night. Thessaly Vorn had returned. They came up out of the Garden of Bones together, and they did not let go of each other's hand until they reached the high windows of the council chamber. The seneschal was already there, white-faced. Mireska stood at the great map table with her hood pushed back and her hair undone. The blue brazier flames had risen so high they were licking the underside of the iron rafters. Through the windows, Saoirse could see the outer wall. She could also see what was approaching it. It was not an army. What moved across the snow toward Caraval was a single column of figures, perhaps 100 of them, walking with the same slow, exact, identical pace. They did not break formation. She recognized the uniforms. They were the men of the 7 northern watchtowers, the garrison who had been reported lost. They had not been killed. They had been taken and used. At the head of the column, alone and unarmed, walked Thessaly Vorn. He was looking up at the keep. He was looking, specifically, at the window where Saoirse stood. She felt the star mark on her forearm flare with a heat that was not painful, but was something almost worse than pain. My king. The seneschal's voice was thin. He has stopped a quarter-mile out. He says he wishes to speak with the queen. No, Draven said immediately. Yes, Saoirse said. The king turned to her, his face hard. Saoirse, he is here for you. If you go down, you will not come back. He is here for both of us. If I do not go down, he will walk those bodies through the gate and over your guards and into this keep, and he will take me, and you will die trying to stop him, and the kingdom will fall. I am the gift, Draven. The gift is no use sitting in a tower. I cannot lose you. You will not. You do not know what he can do. I know what I can do. Or I know what I think I can do. And I would rather find out at the gate than in this room while I listen to your warriors die one at a time. The king closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were gold. Mireska, bring me the obsidian ring from my mother's vault. My king, that ring was used in the rite. It was returned. The other one. Mireska's face went still. There is no other one. There is. And you know there is. And you will go and get it now. She bowed and left the chamber at a near run. The king turned back to Saoirse. He took her left hand, turned the wrist up so the star mark was visible, and pressed his thumb against it. There is a thing my mother told me. I did not understand it when she told me. I thought it was the rambling of a dying woman, but one piece I remembered. She said, "The star cannot be broken alone, and she cannot break alone. The bond that wakes her is the bond that protects her, and the bond that protects her is the bond that lets her break what she has come to break. The bond mark. I am bound to you. You are bound to me. What he comes to do to you, he must come through me to do. I do not know if that will be enough, but it is what we have. It is enough. Mireska returned within the quarter hour with the second ring. It was smaller than the first, plainer, made of the same obsidian but unset with any stone. Draven slid it onto Saoirse's right hand. It fit her exactly, as though it had been measured for her many years before she had been born. My mother's. She wanted me to give it to the woman in the dreams. I know. I felt her wanting you to. He did not ask how she knew. They went down to the gate together. The snow had stopped falling. The column of dead men stood in a perfect motionless line. Thessaly Vorn stood 10 paces in front of the gate, the air around him still bending the snow away from his bare hands, his pale river-water eyes fixed on Saoirse from the instant she stepped through the small postern door. The king walked beside her. 2 of his bonded warriors walked behind them. Thessaly Vorn smiled. My niece. You will not call me that? You know then. I know. I am sorry. I would have preferred that you not know yet. The work goes more easily when the subject is not aware, but my brother always was sentimental. His eyes flicked to Draven. And you, my king. I see you have been doing some learning of your own. I will not waste words on you, the king said. That is wise. We have very little time. Let me be brief. Thessaly turned back to Saoirse. I am going to give you a choice, niece. Walk to me, of your own will, alone, and unbind from your husband. The bond mark can be removed in 3 words spoken aloud. I will teach you the words. Walk to me, speak the words, and I will end the Corvane line painlessly. The king will die, with no more suffering than a man drifting into sleep. After that, I will take you north, and I will teach you what you are, and I will not break you. You will live a long life, and you will use the gift of the star for the work it was always meant to do. Or I walk those 100 dead men through your husband's gate, and I take this keep stone by stone, and I take you out of it the way I took your father's wife out of the ground when I went to look at her last summer. And then I break you. And then I use you. And the king's death is not painless. The star mark on Saoirse's wrist had gone cold. Uncle, you said the star bound herself to no house. You said her gift was the gift of breaking, of unmaking, of undoing what could not otherwise be undone. The healer told you that. She is correct, as far as her knowledge goes. Then tell me, what if the thing the star came to break was not the Corvane line? Thessaly Vorne went still. For the first time since she had met him, Saoirse saw something flicker across his face. It was uncertainty. Niece, the star was bound to the work of ending what should not continue. The Corvane line is a corruption of the original 3 sisters' vow. It must be ended. That is the work. The work that the Vorne line decided was the work. The work that was given. By whom? He said nothing. By whom, uncle? By the first of us, 6 generations ago. By a man who was burned in a barn outside Threshin. A man whose grandmother bound him to something with her last breath. A man who did not ask, before he took the binding, what the binding wanted. You are speaking of things you do not understand. I am speaking of things that I am only just beginning to understand. But I understand this much, uncle. The star did not come to me through the line of Vorn. The star came to me through my father, who broke with the Vorn line and gave his life to do it. The star came to me through a mother who sat by my bed when I cried out from dreams she knew I should not be having and held me anyway. None of that was your work. None of that was the work you were given. She raised her left hand. The bond mark was glowing now. So was the star mark beside it. I think you have had the wrong work all along, uncle. I think the binding your grandmother put on the boy in the barn was not a binding to end the Corvani line. I think it was a binding to end something. And the boy did not ask what. And his sons did not ask what. And across 6 generations you have been doing a work that was never the right work. And you have grown into the thing the star was sent to break. Thessaly Vorn did not move. But his column of dead men behind him took one slow step forward in unison. Niece, you are talking. You are not unbinding. The talk is not the choice. I have made my choice. She lifted her left wrist higher. The star mark, which had been the size of a thumbprint, began to grow. It spread up the skin of her forearm like ink unfurling in water. The single dot multiplied, became 7 dots, became 70, and became 1,000 small points of dark light that ran up under the sleeve of her dress and bloomed, finally, in a wide pale corona around her head. Thessaly Vorn took one involuntary step backward. It was the only step he had ever taken backward in his life. That is not possible. You said it yourself, uncle. The conditions are right. She raised both her hands toward Thessaly Vorn. She spoke a single word. It was the word her own voice had spoken from inside her chest in the courtyard 9 nights ago. Remember. The dead men in the snow remembered. 100 bodies straightened at once. 100 faces turned. 100 mouths opened. And what came out of them was not the breath of the thing that had been moving them, but the last cries of the men they had been before they had been taken. Saoirse heard her name in some of them. She heard the names of wives and children and home villages in others. Thessaly Vorn screamed. It was the first true sound he had made. He fell to his knees in the snow. The corona of light around Saoirse's head pulsed once, and once more, and then went out. She did not fall. She remained standing, with her husband's hand in hers, and 100 men in the snow falling to their final rest, and her uncle on his knees before her, with his hands pressed to his face, and his pale river water eyes streaming with tears that he had not shed in 600 years. Niece, what have you done to me? I have given you back what your grandmother took. I am dying. You are remembering. Dying will come after. I was a boy. In a barn. With my grandmother. I had a name. What was your name? Tomas. His voice broke on the word. My name was Tomas Vorn, and I was 8 years old, and I was very afraid, and my grandmother held my hand so I would not be afraid alone. Tomas, be afraid no longer. The work is done. You can rest now. He closed his eyes. He did not open them again. The wind began to blow again. The snow began to fall. Saoirse turned to Draven. He was looking at her with an expression she could not read. My king. It is over. His mouth opened to answer. He did not get the chance. The arrow struck him in the back, just below the left shoulder blade. The head of the arrow was black, and the shaft was carved with sigils Saoirse could not read but recognized at once as old as the star, and the king of Caerval pitched forward into the snow before her with a soft sound of surprise. She caught him as he fell. She went down to her knees in the snow with her husband across her thighs, and his blood, which was the same dark color as it had been on the rite stone, began to spread across the white between her hands. Draven. Saoirse. She raised her head. She looked across the white plain. Far behind where Thessaly's column had stood, in the tree line at the edge of the forest, a single rider sat on a black horse, holding a black bow. The rider lowered the bow slowly. The rider was small. The rider was dressed in white. The rider was a woman. She lifted one hand in a slow, deliberate gesture that might have been a wave, or a salute, or a promise. Then she turned her horse and rode into the trees and was gone. She did not let them take him from her. Mireska came running with 2 of her under-healers, and a pallet, and a satchel. Saoirse let none of them touch him until she had pulled the arrow herself. It came out clean. It should not have come out clean. The shaft was barbed, and a wound like that should have torn half his back open. But when Saoirse pulled, the arrow came out as easily as a needle from cloth, and the wound it left behind was a small dark circle no larger than a coin. It did not bleed. That was worse than if it had bled. Mireska saw the wound and went the color of old bone. My queen, we must get him inside, now, before the sigils on the shaft finish their work. They got him onto the pallet. They got the pallet into the keep. They got the king into a long stone room behind the council chamber, where a stone table waited beneath a circle of 7 hanging lamps, and where the air smelled of herbs that had been burning for many hours in preparation for a thing Mireska had clearly known might come. You knew this might happen. I feared it might happen. The arrow is old work, my queen. Older than the star. The sigils on the shaft do not kill the body. They unbind the soul from the flesh while the flesh is still living. The flesh will continue. The soul will not. He has perhaps 4 hours. What can you do? My queen, I cannot do anything. I am a healer of the line of the moon. I mend flesh. I cannot mend a soul that is being unmade by old work. There is only one thing in this kingdom that can reach where the work is reaching. The star. The king was conscious, just barely. His eyes were half open, dim gray. His hand twitched once toward her. Saoirse, I am here. The rider. In white. I have seen her before. In the dreams. There is more than one of them. I do not think we found the last. I know, Draven. Be quiet. Save your strength. I have no strength to save. She bent over him. She pressed her forehead to his. Listen to me. You are not allowed to die. You promised me a child. You promised me a name. You promised me a life that was not measured in 9-day deadlines. I am holding you to all of it. His mouth moved. She thought he was trying to smile. She thought he was failing. His eyes closed. The wound on his back had begun, very slowly, to glow. Not with light, with absence. The skin around the dark circle was going translucent, then transparent, then simply gone. My queen, Mireska said quietly. If you are going to do anything, you have perhaps a quarter of an hour. She had used the star once. She did not know how she had used it. She knew only that she had spoken a word, and the word had unbound a thing that had not wanted to be unbound, and the unbinding had been a kind of remembering. This was not the same. This was not a binding that needed to be broken. This was a soul that needed to be held. And she did not know how to hold a soul. She closed her eyes. She thought of the dreams. She had dreamed of him since she was 7. In every dream, the same thing. A circular room, a black sun, a throne, a man with a scar. He looked at her. He said. What had he said? She had never finished the sentence in the dream. She made herself remember. In the dream, the man on the throne looked at her, and he said, Find me before I am gone. That was what he had said. In every dream. For 15 years. It was not a metaphor. It was instructions. She opened her eyes. Take me to the Black Sun Chapel. My queen, the king cannot be moved. Then you will have to bring the Black Sun Chapel to him. It took 6 wolves and the seneschal himself. They could not bring the slab. But they could bring the iron disc of the Black Sun. They could bring the bound priest, the brazier, the bone knife, the small jar of dark red preserved blood. They hung the iron disc above the stone table where the king lay dying. The bound priest came in his white robes, and he made no sound. Saoirse drew the bone knife across her own palm, the same palm that had been cut at the rite. She pressed her bleeding hand to the king's chest over his heart. She bent close. Draven, listen. I am going to do something that is probably not allowed. I am going to do it anyway. I think the breaking she came for was not the breaking of your line, but the breaking of every barrier between the people who were meant to find each other across all the long winters they were forced to wait. I am going to take what is in me, and I am going to give it to you, and I am going to ask you, with everything I have, to hold on for 1 more hour. His eyes did not open, but she felt his fingers tighten around hers. She closed her eyes and reached, with everything she did not yet know how to do, into the thing inside her chest that had spoken its own name 9 nights ago. The star answered. It came up through her shoulders, and her arms and her hands, and out through the cut in her palm and into him. She felt herself pouring. She did not stop. She let it go. She gave it because it was what the gift had been waiting to do, and because she had finally understood that the star had not been bound to a house, because she had been waiting for something the houses had not yet built. She had been waiting for two people who would choose each other. The disc above them began to rotate. The bound priest spoke in words that were not the words of any rite, in a voice that was, briefly, his own voice, and not the voice of the thing he had been bound to. The dark circle on the king's back filled in. The skin came back. The flesh came back. The wound closed and faded, and where the arrow had landed, only a small silver mark remained, in the exact shape of the second mark on Saoirse's forearm. He drew a long, ragged breath. His eyes opened. They were not gray anymore. They were not obsidian. They were not gold. They were the color of pale river water. For one terrible heartbeat, Saoirse thought she had failed. Then he blinked, and the river water cleared, and beneath it she saw the dark gold of her husband returning. He looked at her. He saw her. Saoirse, you should not have been able to do that. I know. What does it cost you? She knew that her hand on his chest was very cold. She knew that the cut in her palm had not closed the way the wound on his back had. It cost me less than losing you, she said. He lifted his free hand and laid it against the side of her face. She turned her face into his palm. The bound priest stepped back. The disc above them slowed and stopped. The brazier flames went from blue to ordinary orange. Mireska covered her face with her hands. He was unsteady. He swayed. She caught him. He leaned his forehead against hers. The rider. There are more of them. Yes. And we have used the gift. Yes. He looked at her. His mouth was tired, but it was almost smiling. My queen. I think we are about to have a long winter. My king. We have already had one. The seneschal cleared his throat from the doorway. My queen. The wall has held. The 100 have fallen and stayed fallen. There are reports from the south, my queen, that... He stopped. That what, Lord Tashkir? That a rider in white has been seen at the borders of 3 other kingdoms in the past hour. The room went still. Draven looked at her, and he held out his hand. She took it. My queen. We have 1 night before the long night begins. Then we should make it count. The first morning in 7 years that the keep of Caraval had been free of the Vorn work. It would not last, but it was a morning, and it was theirs. The reports came in through the day. 3 white riders had been seen. 3, not 1. They had been spotted at 3 borders simultaneously, all of them mounted on black horses, all of them carrying black bows, all of them women. They had not crossed any border. They had paused, raised one hand in a slow gesture that was almost a salute, and turned and ridden away. It was a message. The message was, "We are coming." The council chamber stayed lit through the day and into the second night. The king could stand now. He could walk, slowly, with his hand on Saoirse's shoulder. The silver star mark on his back was the color of moonlight, and Mireska had told him it was the only reason he was alive. Saoirse had slept 3 hours. She could not afford more. The star had not come back to her. She had reached inside her chest and found, where the gift had been, only a quiet space. Not empty. not gone. Only quiet, the way a forge is quiet after it has been worked very hard. By the second dawn, they had a picture. The picture was bad. The 3 riders in white were not 3 women. They were the same woman, 3 times. The Vorn work had at some point succeeded in doing what Thessaly had failed to do with Saersa. It had taken a star, and it had broken her, and it had bound her to the work, and the broken star had been split into 3 shapes that could ride 3 horses and stand at 3 borders at the same hour. What she had been waiting for. Every text said the same thing. She had been waiting for another star to wake, for a star to call to a star. She has waited for me, Saersha said. Yes, said the bound priest, and now I have woken, and she is coming. How long? My queen. She is at the borders today. She will be at our gate within 7 nights. The chamber was silent. Draven set both his hands flat against the dark wood. Then we have 7 nights to learn what cannot be learned in 7 nights. And we have 7 nights to do what cannot be done in 7 nights. And we have 7 nights to remember every single thing this kingdom has forgotten in 19 generations of forgetting. So we will begin. They did not sleep for the most part in those 7 nights. Saersa came to understand the keep in a way she had not understood it before. She walked it from the lowest subcellar to the highest tower. She sat in the great archive with the seneschal and read scrolls until her eyes failed her. She went down to the Garden of Bones each morning and laid 1 hand on the Queen's stone and 1 hand on the unnamed son's stone, and she did not know what she was asking from them, but she felt that something was being given. Mireska taught her what could be taught. The bound priest taught her what could not. Draven came to her bed every night, no longer in his clothes, no longer keeping the careful inch of distance, no longer holding only her hand. The carefulness that had grown between them had broken in the Garden of Bones and had not reformed. On the 4th night, she felt the star return. It was small at first, a warmth at the base of her sternum. On the 5th night, she told Draven. He held her in the dark, and he did not speak for what felt like the longest minute of her life, and when he finally spoke, his voice was rough with something that was either relief or fear, or both. It is enough? It is what we have. Saersha. If it is not enough, you will not give the rest of yourself the way you gave the rest of yourself on the stone table. You will let it end. You will let me end. You will save what is left of yourself, and you will go south, and you will live, and the star will have time to come back to its full strength in someone who is not me, and in some generation that is not this one. She gave him no reply for a long while. Draven. That is a stupid promise to ask for. It is the only one I am asking for. I will not give it. Because you will not need it. We are going to be enough. There is no version of the world in which I leave you on a stone table and ride south. There is no such version. Do not ask me to. He was quiet. My queen. My king. I love you. It was the first time he had said it. I know, she said. I have known since the garden. I wanted to say it before the long night began. I know. I am glad. I love you too. I think I have loved you since I was 7 years old and did not know what loving someone was. He held her until the dawn bell. The long night began on the 7th evening. The sun did not set as it should have. The sky went the color of bone, and the bone-white shape Saersa had been seeing since the courtyard came down low and stood at the western horizon like a small pale eye. It was not a moon. She had understood that for weeks now. It was a sun, the black sun. The iron disk in the chapel had only ever been a pointer. This was the actual one. It had been hidden in the sky, visible only to the star-blooded, for as long as anyone could remember. And now it was coming down. The 3 riders were beneath it. They came over the ridgeline 3 abreast on 3 identical black horses, and they wore 3 identical white robes, and Saoirse could see from the wall of the keep that they had 3 identical faces. The face was beautiful. It was also in some way she could not explain exactly her own. Older, thinner, worn smooth by 6 centuries of use. But the same face. The star she had been was looking back at her across the white plain. Draven came to stand beside her on the wall. He said nothing. He took her left hand and held it, and they watched the 3 riders come on. The riders stopped a quarter-mile out, in exactly the same place where Thessaly had stopped, 9 nights ago. Then, all 3 at once, they raised their right hands. In each hand was a black bow. Each bow was already drawn. Each arrow was carved with the same sigils that had been carved on the arrow that had taken Draven down before her. This time there were 3 of them, and they were aimed at her. Saoirse. Draven. Get behind me. No. Saoirse, please. She lifted her left hand and pressed her palm against his cheek. Draven Corvan, listen to me. You have a sigil on your back that was put there by the star. You have a wife who you have loved for 15 years through dreams, and 7 through silence, and 1 across stones. You are not going to lose me to 3 arrows on a wall. You are going to let me do the work I came here to do. And you are going to do the work you came here to do, which is to stand beside me and not flinch. Can you do that for me, my king? Yes. Good. She turned back to the white plain. The 3 riders loosed their arrows. Saoirse Velerij Corvana, the star-blooded queen of Kerval, the daughter of a man who had broken with his line and given his life for it, the wife of a man whose curse she had been born to lift, raised both her hands and spoke a word. The word that came out was not remember. The word that came out was enough. The 3 arrows stopped in the air 10 paces from the wall. The corona of light rose around her again, larger now, large enough that it covered Draven beside her, and the wall beneath them and the warriors in the courtyard and the keep itself. The light was not pale this time, it was gold. It was the gold of sunrise. It poured out of her, and out of the bond mark, and out of the silver sigil on Draven's back, and out of every place where 2 people had chosen each other and meant it. The black sun on the western horizon began to dim. The 3 arrows dropped. The 3 riders lowered their bows. The star who had been broken 6 centuries ago looked across the white plain at the star who had not been broken. She looked, Saoirse thought, very tired. Saoirse stepped forward to the edge of the wall. Sister. It was not a word she had planned, but it was the right word. She felt it land. She felt all 3 of the riders flinch as one. Sister, you have done the work for a long time. It was not your work. It was given to you the way it was given to my uncle. You did not ask. You did not consent. You were a child once, like he was, and you had a name once, like he did. And the work took your name and gave you a face that is mine, and a horse that is black, and a bow that does not belong to you. I am not going to fight you. I am going to do what was done for him. She raised her left hand and spoke her second word. Remember. The 3 riders in unison dropped their bows. The 3 horses in unison knelt. The 3 women in unison lifted their hands to their faces, and Saoirse saw, even at a quarter mile, the moment when each of them began to weep with the recognition of a name that had been waiting 600 years to be spoken. She did not hear the name. She did not need to. The black sun on the western horizon went out. The bone-colored sky began to deepen, slowly, toward the cold blue-black of an ordinary winter dusk. The corona of gold light around Saoirse and the wall faded. The 3 riders, who were now 1 woman in 3 places, lowered themselves slowly from their 3 horses, and they sat in the snow, and they wept. And Saoirse understood that the dying would be a kindness. She turned to Draven. She had no strength left. She felt herself begin to fall. He caught her. He had been waiting the whole time to catch her. She slept for 9 days. It was a fitting number, she thought afterward. 9 days had brought her to Kerval. 9 days had been the deadline of the contract Draven had broken with his own seal. 9 days, now, was the price of what she had done on the wall, and she paid it gladly. She woke on the 10th morning. The first thing she saw was Draven, asleep in the chair beside the bed. He had pulled the chair as close as it would go. There was a candle on the bedside table, and a tray of food that had been brought up and not eaten, and a book of poetry that had been moved from the Queen's old bedside. The book was open. The page was marked with a fresh sprig of mountain heather. Green this time, not brown. Serge looked at it without speaking for a long while. She turned her hand over beneath the blanket, and she found his hand, and she threaded her fingers through his. He woke at once. Saoirse. My king. He bent his head and pressed his forehead to their joined hands, and he stayed like that for what felt like the better part of an hour, and Saoirse felt, beneath the silence, the thing that had been broken in him since the night his queen had died finally, fully, finished healing. When he raised his head, his eyes were dry. You slept for 9 days. I was tired. You were nearly dead. I was tired. The dying was a separate option I did not choose. He almost laughed. She felt the breath of it against her hand, and she understood that the kingdom had begun, in those 9 days, to remember how laughter sounded. The kingdom had been remembering many things. The eastern village whose souls had vanished had been found again, all 300 of them, walking home along the eastern road in good health and with no memory of where they had been. The 7 northern watchtowers had been rebuilt by their own ghosts, who had laid 1 stone each in the ruins of the towers and then settled, finally, into the snow. The crops in the southern fields, which had failed for 7 winters running, were sprouting in the snow. The bound priest had been released from his binding. He had asked for permission to go south, to see if his mother was still living. The king had granted it, with a horse and a letter of safe passage. The priest had taken the white robes off and burned them in the courtyard before he rode out, and he had not looked back, but he had raised one hand at the gate in a slow gesture that Saoirse had understood as a salute. The other bound priests of the kingdom, all 23 of them, had been released within the same week. Her mother had recovered. Slowly, imperfectly, with a quietness that had not been in her before. But she had risen from her bed on the morning Saoirse had spoken the word enough on the wall. Her first letter had said simply, I should have told you everything when you were old enough to know. Your father would have wanted you to know. I was afraid. Forgive me. Saoirse had written back, there is nothing to forgive. Come north when the roads open. There is a garden I would like you to see. Her mother had come north on the first day of true spring. She had stood in the garden of bones beside her daughter, and she had laid one hand on the queen's stone and one hand on the unnamed son's stone, and she had said, very quietly, the name of Saoirse's father aloud for the first time in 21 years. Aldwyn Vorn. The garden had not flinched. The earth had received the name as the earth receives a small offering of water. Her brother Kion was 16 by then. She brought him north for the spring. She gave him a horse and a writ in her own hand, and she sent him riding the entire southern reach, with deeds she had spent the winter drafting. The 700 souls who had lived under her family's protection through all the long winters were given the ground beneath their feet. Xian wept openly at the 7th deed and continued weeping for the rest of the day, and at the end of it he had said to Saoirse, I am going to be a different kind of head of house than our father was. I am going to be the kind he would have wanted to be, if they had not killed him. She had not corrected him on whose father had been killed by whom. She had let him have the simpler version. He would learn the rest in his own time. The child came in the autumn, a girl, black hair like her father's, pale gray eyes like her mother's, except when she was angry, when they went briefly the color of pale river water, and then settled back to gray. They named her Isul, after the queen who had not lived to bear her own daughter. She would be the first star-blooded child born to a Corvani king in 19 generations. She would also be, Mireska said quietly when she had first held the baby, the first child of the line to be born without the curse on her shoulders. Saoirse had wept when Mireska had said it. Draven had held his daughter against his chest, and he had pressed his face into her dark hair, and he had whispered something to her that no one but she heard. The boy came 2 years later. They named him Aldwin. On the 7th anniversary of the night, Saoirse Velerage had walked alone down the basalt aisle of the Caerval throne room in a wine-red cloak. The king of Caerval held a feast. The throne room was full of nobles again. The torches did not flicker. The frost on the windows had been replaced with wreaths of green winterleaf. The banners on the walls had been re-dyed and re-hung, and they were no longer black with silver wolves, but silver with black wolves. The dead queen's name had been carved into a new plaque above the dais, with the unnamed son's name beside it, and beneath them, both a third name had been newly cut. Aldwin Vorn, father of the queen, who broke the chain. The king and queen sat together at the high table. Their daughter, who was 6, was asleep with her head on her mother's lap. Their son, who was 4, was failing to eat his dinner with the determined dedication of a 4-year-old who has discovered that he can refuse food and the world will not end. Mireska was at the high table. So was the seneschal. So was the woman who had been the bound priest, whose name was Ressa. The young woman with the thin scar across the bridge of her nose, who had hidden the silver Velerage pin in her apron pocket on a night 7 years ago, was at a smaller table near the front. Her name was Brielle Otterham. The pin was now at her throat. The king rose. The hall fell quiet. 7 years ago tonight, he said, a woman walked into this room alone. She was not invited. She was not announced. She did not bow. The court expected me to kill her. I expected, when I rose from my throne, that I would kill her. Instead, I asked her name. He paused. I have spent every day since then thanking the gods I did not yet believe in for the impulse that made me ask. A murmur of warm laughter rose through the hall. There is no formal toast for what I want to say. There is no protocol for it. The bound priests would have known the words, but we have no bound priests anymore, and that is as it should be. So I will use the words I have. To my queen, to the woman who broke the curse no one believed could be broken, to the mother of my children, to the star who chose, of all the thrones in 3 kingdoms and all the wolves who would have begged her to walk past them, to walk down this aisle. Who proposed to me in front of 47 of the realm's most terrified nobles? Who reached the foot of the dais and looked me in the eye and said, he turned to her. What did you say to me, my queen? Saoirse smiled, and she rose with their daughter still asleep in her arms, and she said it. Marry me. The hall exploded. The cheering went on for what seemed half the evening. When it finally died, Draven leaned over and pressed his mouth briefly against her temple, and he murmured quietly, only for her. I would say yes again. On the morning we met. On every morning since. On every morning we are given. And on the morning, whichever of us reaches it first, when one of us is asked to follow the other through whatever door the gods open at the end. She turned her face to his. I know. Saoirse, would you? On every one of those mornings, she said, without hesitation. Marry me, Draven Corvana. Marry me on every anniversary of the night I walk down that aisle. I will say yes every time. Outside the great hall of Caerval, the wolves of the kingdom lifted their heads as the cheering rose for the second time, and they did not howl, because there was nothing left to mourn or to warn or to call for. They listened. They listened to their king and queen toast each other in a hall full of people who had remembered finally how to be glad. And in the high tower of the Black Sun, The bell that had tolled 5 times on a winter night 7 years before sat silent in its frame, and would not toll again in the lifetime of any wolf alive that night, and would not toll, the prophecies said, until the next time a kingdom needed breaking, and a star walked alone down a long aisle in a wine-red cloak to do the breaking. It would be a long, long while. In the meantime, there was spring. There was, finally and truly, spring. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this story stayed with you. If it did, the kindest thing you can do is let it find someone else who needs it tonight.